Okay, and we are live for webinar number 3 in this webinar series that we started this year. The first one was on how to budget for content marketing, which was our first one. It went well, given the fact that we haven't done our own webinar. The second one was with Bernard Huang from ClearScope, and we discussed the future of content for a search audience, of SEO content. And this is the third one, and we are very excited about it because we will discuss a very interesting topic, regardless of where you stand, like what your thoughts are, what you believe. AI content is happening right now. And yeah, maybe there is a lot of hype around it, but there may be some useful use cases, right? And I would like to welcome Andrea. Before I welcome Andrea, let me just share a, a few things about him. First of all, I've been like watching him and following his journey for quite a while, even though he doesn't know about it. But it was a webinar you did with I can't recall the exact name of the company, but it was on Google Data Studio or something like that, and it was mind blowing. It was really good content, technical content that you don't find very often in webinars. And then I dived a bit deeper to see what you folks are building at WordLift. We also had one person from WordLift on our podcast as a guest, and I understood that these folks, they know their stuff, they know what they're doing. And so when the time came for us to start looking for a guest to like do a presentation on AI content, I think that Andrea was among the first ones that came to mind. Now, a couple of things, and then Andrea, the stage will be all yours. Andrea Volpini is the CEO of WordLift. He's a visionary entrepreneur now focusing on the semantic web and AI. He's the co-founder of Inside Out 10 and Redlink. Andrea has more than 25 years of world-class experience in online strategies and web publishing. Nowadays, he provides tools and consulting services to global brands that need to grow online. Andrea, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks. Great introduction, and thanks for following us. Yeah, I mean, it's exciting as a webinar. I always, for me, it's always an occasion to explore the new line of works that we're doing at WordLift and how the market is evolving. So let's keep this session as interactive as possible. Raise your questions. I can see that there is a question tab in the chat. And of course, George, feel free to stop me, ask question yourself. So yes, this is a quick generative video. So it's a text to video that I just made before jumping on the webinar. Yeah, I'm co-founder and CEO of WordLift. I've been working on research and development before creating WordLift. I've been working many years in content management systems, and now I'm very focused on automating SEO, modern SEO, which also has to take into account how search engines are becoming answer engines, and how the experience that we have with ChatGPT or Bing Chat or Bard, it's kind of shedding some light on how content consumption is evolving, and what it takes for a publisher or an e-commerce to adapt to this transformation. So yeah, it's packed. It's a lot of stuff, but I will try to be as light as possible. I'm going to share some numbers about one of the recent experiments that I've done. We do experiments all the time with our clients, and but in this case, this is an experiment that I've done on the WordLift.io website. We build knowledge graphs to help companies automate structured data markup, but also create the foundation for AI services. And so we've been creating content at scale using a language model for the last 22 months. So we have a lot of, significant amount of experience in content, in AI content. So roughly, we'll look at the generative AI ecosystem, and we'll try to introduce a concept that I'm particularly keen on, which is large language model optimization. So how do I make a language model aware of my brand and services? How can I help Bing Chat understand, my companies and my services? And then we'll look at a specific use case, and we'll kind of move backward and try to understand, how language model works. Most of us are using language models with introduction of ChatGPT, but I realized that not everyone knows and understands the way in which they function. I always think that this is important. And then we'll dive deeper into emerging behaviors of large language models. This is how we try to steer the completion of a generative model. And then once again and foremost, and this is kind of the best way to start, is we want to focus on identity, who we are, what is our goal in life. Because I am an SEO. I became an SEO. I've been working on the internet for over 25 years, but now I'm very fascinated by the idea of, helping machines and search engine understand, what we do. And so we have to focus on who we are, and then we can start looking at AI as a set of tools that provide additional opportunity. We'll quickly look at some of the pitfalls when implementing an AI workflow, and some of the lessons that we learned by working with large brands on AI content and knowledge graphs. So we're WordLift. We help clients increase revenue. We sell SEO as a product. That's kind of, in short, what we do. And we have a team of around 20 people and work with brands around the world. So search has changed. That's a fact. And we no longer look at the 10 blue links, and we no longer look at Google as the only source of information, but we are starting to look at tools like ChatGPT as a way of sourcing information. And so Google biggest competitor is OpenAI, but reality is that Google biggest competitor is Microsoft, that has heavily invested in OpenAI. And of course, right now, Google has introduced also his own chat system, leveraging on a language model called Lambda. Most of us have tested it. I continuously test both Bing Chat and Bard. At the moment, Bing Chat is offering a richer experience and has hit 100 million daily active users. This is a significant numbers because, of course, we have to understand the search ecosystem, how the business works. And for Microsoft to finally hit such a milestone, it's significant achievement. And as we can see, even in this very simple question about how many users Bing gain, Bard is kind of evasive. It's indexed in the web. This is interesting. So it's also able to understand when we publish content and reason about the content that's been published, which means that we are still, playing a role here because we're feeding this system with data. And, it's also important that we might have concern about if there is a fair use in systems like that when they use our content. And of course, the fact that Bing Chat has reference links, it's preferable in comparison to Bard that doesn't have, many references at the moment. But it also give us an idea that Google is preparing for a major change on its, search experience. So Bard is just kind of a part of a broader experience that it's coming up. So I've been a strong advocate of this term in SEO. We have had several ways of kind of changing the scheme, and we moved from SEO to AAO, answering engine optimization. This was introduced by my dear friend Jason Barnard, and now we are kind of starting to use this LLMO, which is might not sound perfect, but it means stands for large language model optimization. I'm very happy that Google gets it and give us a feature snippet for that. So this is about helping the system understand about our companies and content. And there are three things that really we can do to increase the ability of these systems to understand when we publish something. One is using structured data, because of course with structured data we provide a scaffolding for the knowledge that we put on the web, and makes it very easy for a search engine attached to a language model to understand and disambiguate properly the concept. Then, of course, it's about targeting the relevant search intent, because as we deal with an AI, we want to create content that it's consistent with what the people are looking for. Similar to SEO, traditional SEO, but in a way it's more long tail. So we're looking at long tail search intent when we want to facilitate something like Bing Chat to pick up a piece of content. And then, of course, it's corroboration. We have to build confidence by corroborating data with other data. We want to make sure, for example, that the same information that I have on my LinkedIn, it's on my webpage, and it's also can also be found on Twitter. So corroboration with data, it's extremely relevant, because when you build a knowledge graph, like you have to have if you're Bing or Google, then you need multiple data sources that will feed this knowledge graph, and then you will use a language model to interrogate this knowledge graph alongside with the web index. But should SEO use AI at all? I mean, that's kind of a question. Of course, I've given it for granted. I have a company that uses AI for doing SEO, so I shouldn't ask this question. But it's becoming relevant instead, because, of course, the web is dramatically evolving as we are producing more content in a semi-automated way. And not always works, because sometimes we end up in generating tons of traffic, but then boom, all of a sudden we can lose it. Why? Because lack of authenticity and a lot of other issues that, of course, conflicts with guidelines of a search engine. So we've seen a lot of these charts where you see, it goes up and then boom, after a few weeks of extreme success. Then the search engine intervenes and kind of changed the game. So Fabrice Canel is the product manager at Microsoft Bing. It's also a very nice person, and here I hope that Fabrice, it's okay with me kind of transforming him in the Teen Man. Provided in a couple of the latest event a very elementary indication that allow us to understand how SEO can use AI. So first of all, of course, it's crucial for a search engine to access URLs and stay up to date with the latest changes. So one practical examples that we are now focusing on a lot is using AI for creating internal links at scale. We've been doing this since 2017. So since the inception of our tool, we have created internal links on a website to help the search engine find pages that might be more remote. Now this is becoming more important because, of course, there is more content out there. And so we want to create a very significant and compact internal linking structure. Of course, we have to let a search engine or a chatbot crawl our site. This seems to be obvious, but of course, we might also decide that we do not want something like ChatGPT from crawling our website because maybe there's not enough traffic coming from there at the moment. If I look at Bing chat interface, well, I can see the links. But if I go on ChatGPT interface, there are very few links. And now that ChatGPT plugins have been introduced, well, I mean, people are starting to look at how we can block, with the robot.txt, the ChatGPT plugin to access our website, because maybe there's not fair use. Fair use means that we are getting an equivalent value by the traffic that the search engine is bringing back to us. And is there a fair use if I use ChatGPT? Maybe not. And so this is up to us to decide. But of course, if we want, to be visible, then we want to let this system crawl our site. And so I'm totally okay with, Bing crawling our website and usually our client's site. But I do understand when clients express some concern with, letting ChatGPT crawl their site, because it's not exactly the same as a search engine. And then the third indication that Fabrice gave us is, write great content, of course. And he didn't say write great content only with the help of the humans, but write great content and then annotate that content with schema. Because by adding schema, you can make this great content surface and become relevant across, multiple intents. Without, it gets a little bit more complicated. And so we want to prevent any complexity when a search engine reads our pages, and we want to make it super clear where we want to go in terms of, search intents. And of course, develop your audience. This is a world, it's a simple sentence, but there is a world behind it. What does it mean? It means that you have to express your authority. It means that you have to focus on your brand. And of course, all of these aspects are becoming more and more important because there is more content out there. And so we want to be relevant for the audience. And so we want to develop the audience, which means focusing on the brand and focusing on the authority. In general, we are observing a paradigm shift. So we are seeing that from a web where, we write a piece of content, we store it on a web server, and then this web server goes there and index, and the content is static, and it's sold. As soon as it gets published, it gets sold. And so the search engine has, for example, to give more value when you update the content. But we're moving into this new ecosystem of generative application where the content is created on the fly, and it's created, based on different parameters, and it's creating a unique real-time experience that, of course, doesn't really make sense to be indexed in most of the cases because it's dynamic. And we have to adapt to this change, and we have to prepare for creating content on the edge. So what does that mean? I mean, what does it mean to create content on the edge? It means that, we have to be able to think of content as something liquid that adapts to, whatever scenario we have. And we can do this because, of course, marketing is changing, and has changed forever, because it's not just about writing the great content, but, we also have to make this content, or can make this content dynamic. We can make this content adaptable. We can make this content smart. And so here I try to keep track of the different AI models on the bottom, the different modalities that we can play with. So the text, the code, the image, the speech, the video, the 3D. And you saw I made a video, at the beginning of the presentation using Gen 2, which is a tool that allows you to create a video and edit it just with a text prompt. And for each one of these modality and using the various models, I started to look at, what are the workflows that we can actually experience and activate, and then, that take advantage of these generative models. And so I mentioned we are creating internal links on the fly. We are creating Q&A pairs on the fly in most cases. We're writing thousands of product description at scale. We're summarizing content, for example, to make it more easy to be read on smaller devices. We are automating structured data markup across multiple sites, and so on and so forth. So the different areas of SEO can be, in fact, automated, whether you are into programmatic SEO, whether you are into video or YouTube optimization. There is a chance that there is a model and there is a workflow that you can start using today to increase, the reach and the findability of your content. Oh, wow, I see there is a lot of people in the chat. Good. So how big is too big? Now, this is a very important paper that has been recently published. A few months back has been published, and it's titled "The Dangers of Stochastic Parrots." And it's something that I always advise people to read and go through, because it provides valuable insights on the risks associated with using large language models. So if on one side I'm enticing you to start looking at your SEO strategy and what models would fit for what workflow, on the other hand, I want you to be aware as much as possible on the societal risk of using large language model. Using a language model for doing something that can be done with another tool, it's unnecessarily, and it's consuming a lot of environmental resources, for example. Much like it is to run a crawl if you don't need to run a crawl. There is a lot of activities that we should do with the environment in mind, knowing, okay, do I need to do this, or do I have already this data? Do I need fresher data? Do I need a language model? Can I use, something smaller? Can I use less resources? So this is kind of, I want to encourage you to look at different areas. And I'm very excited about, generative AI, but at the same time, I'm also very concerned about the use of it, especially when we move into business, from business to business to consumer. That becomes even more complicated. Back on SEO. Finally, we're back on SEO. So this is kind of a tale from the trenches. So I'm a CEO of a company. We have to get new trials, get new leads. We go to events, trade shows. I do webinars, so in order to create interaction. But what can you do on your website as a SaaS using AI? And that's a little bit a story. So that's the last 2 months, 2 months and a few other days. 2 months and a half on the WordLift.io website. We don't have a huge amount of traffic, as you can see. It's not it's a B2B. We have to get the good traffic, but we've done something right, because in the last 2 months we have more than doubled the number of users on our website coming from organic. And it's also interesting to see that usually as a metric, I like to see the click-through rate going up, because we focus a lot on structured data. And so when the click-through rate goes up, it means that we are bringing something valuable for the users, and this is happening right on the SERP in most cases. So how did we achieve these? We kind of I'm going to reverse engineer what we've done so that you can also do it. So we moved from sharing content on scale. Everyone has been doing content marketing for the last 10 years with various degrees of success, to creating values for a user by building apps. So the hottest party in SEO for me as a, in the software as a service, is to build conversational application, because this is a new way of, helping user do things rather than just telling them, how to do things. We can actually make them do things, because we can create application that are helpful and that can create, the beginning of a customer journey. So we do have, to establish authority, and we can use a knowledge graph to do that, because we need to be the one that are reliable for doing certain things. We can't do everything. I can't, on my website, for example, I don't know, recommend you luxury bags to buy. I'm not credible. I'm an SEO. look at me. I'm not a fashion addict. So we have to establish a topical authority on a specific area, and we have to be credible. And then we can create, the application that can bring value to the audience that we are keen on serving. And this is interesting, because without generative AI, this wouldn't be really possible. Okay. So I built 3 application in a few weekends, to be honest. I mean, I do have a tremendous team, so I haven't done other than just the prototypes. But then, of course, I had my Valentina from the marketing team working on the content, and Katia from the UX point of view helping me try to make it less ugly than what a typical AI developer would do. And then I had Ellie, kind of checking on the code and making it better, one iteration after the other. So it's really a teamwork. I mean, there's nothing that you can do by yourself, even though it's becoming now possible for a CEO of a company to build apps. And, I've done a lot of things in my life, so I'm totally okay in developing stuff. I totally have a tech mindset. But to tell you the truth, now it's becoming so simple. Even for me, working on the web for over 25 years, now it's becoming even simpler, because I can just use my voice. I know what I need, and I can, build the front end, build the back end just with the voice. And of course, you need to know what you're going to do. So I built these 3 application. One allows you to extract question and answer. Let me see if I can quickly share the screen with you and change the. Yeah, I can give you an example. Yeah. So this is the first app, and here I'm just gonna take an article from Search Engine Journal that talks about kind of Google looking at the future of search, and with this simple free app, we are extracting, the main question from the application, and then we are providing the answer from these questions coming from these applications. And it kind of gives you an idea what the article talks about. And of course, you can use it also from your own content to understand, what each piece it's really talking about, maybe to create some relevant FAQ markup. And I mean, it's a super easy web page that has, an FAQ block over here with some very relevant question for someone that is looking into AI question answering tools. And then, of course, you have the typical call to action, and, the kind of the website structure that we have.
Andrea, one question. Sorry for interrupting you, but one question that we have here at this point.
Yep.
By Isar. Thank you for the question, Isar. What tools is he using to develop the apps? Just leveraging voice with no development skills? I guess, you can answer that. I don't know if it's the same tool that you use to build all these 3 apps, But I guess the question is, what tools are you using to build it?
Yep. So I can quickly jump on the relevant slide. So first we can look at the tool, and then we can look at the process. And I do have, of course, development skills, so I'm not totally unaware of what's happening behind the scene. But of course, as a non-developer, there are still opportunities out there. So let's look at the tools and the stack and the process, because I think that the tools also evolve very fast. But kind of the methodology and the stack, it's something that you can bring with you. And we can start from the end. So we have the happy customers, the people that we want to reach with this application. And we know that they are, at the moment, accessing multiple gatekeepers, multiple tools acting as gatekeepers, whether it's a search engine like Google or an assistant like Bing Chat, or even the plugins of ChatGPT. They are accessing content from a plethora of different channels. And this is developing, this ecosystem of different tools and search engine and AIs. It's developing further, whether it's Alexa or the Google Assistant or GPT. I mean, you will see so many coming out. It will be an explosion. It's not going to be just about Google, right? I'm working actively with the team at you.com, for example, because as an SEO, I see that I have to market my content on different channels for my clients. And I want my clients to be as independent as possible from Google. Because if I can create even a 5% of traffic from another source, that's good. That's organic. That's something that can create value. Then, of course, we have the content on the website, which is kind of our, backbone of the front end. It's kind of the touch point that we want to focus on. And then kind of the single source of truth, it's either an API that you have sitting in the back that is doing something helpful, or it's a knowledge graph where you have all the metadata that describe the content. So imagine the schema markup that you have placed on the pages for helping Google understand that this is a news article that George has written on AI content, or this is the latest news that Andrea has written, and it talks about WordPress plugins. I mean, all the metadata that you have can be brought into a knowledge graph that exposes API. So that's what I'm using in these cases. I'm using either an API or the API from the knowledge graph. And then I'm using a fantastic open source tool called LangChain that allow us to abstract from the language models. So to have the flexibility to use, GPT-4, or maybe Flan from Google using Hugging Face, or, a model from AI-21 Labs. I don't want to be limited to use GPT only language model from OpenAI, and I can experiment. If I have to create links, I don't need to use GPT-4. I can use T5, for example, or if I have to create a conversational chatbot, maybe I don't need GPT-4. Maybe I can use ChatGPT, or what is called GPT 3.5. So having this abstraction layer in LangChain is very important, because it allows us to evolve as language model evolve. So this is kind of, the technology stack. And then, of course, in the front end, we have WordPress. So our website is built on Divi, and I'm encapsulating the application with an iframe. So that's pretty much, the way in which I use it. Right now, I'm developing the front end directly with Streamlit. This is an open source framework for sharing AI apps directly, so I don't need to do the front end. But of course, eventually we'll build. I will build an API, and then create a front end in JavaScript or something like that. So first of all, what is the process of creating these apps? How does it work? How do we make this happen? How do we generate traffic? So we have to find the idea. We have to look at the customer journey. We have to talk with our customer. We have to understand, either with the prospect or with the already acquired clients, we have to understand what do they need to do, because it's true that they can come to us and we have beautiful resources on how to use structured data and why you need a product knowledge graph for your e-commerce website. But in some cases, for us, it's also important to, let's say, well, let me investigate on the structured data that you have already on your website. So let me show you quickly another application of these three to give you, an idea of how these can, nicely connect with your customer journey. So this is another application that I built to build the structured data audit. So let's say that, I want to do the audit of the structured data on Search Engine Journal, and I just put the URL here, and then it will take a while, and it will just analyze, what's behind. And of course, here we're using our own API to capture the content and to understand, if there is a markup. And then I'm using here a GPT model to create, in natural language, a description that I would provide to a client to say, well, good, there is a, structured data here, and you're primarily using image object and website, and you're talking about social media. This is a piece of this is an entity inside the homepage that could be eventually marked up using another tool. And well, there are no information about the technology. And then of course I'm also providing here the data from the API itself, because of course we want the user to understand what we're doing, and if there is consistency between the text and the actual data behind. Then, of course, we have to develop the AI. So once we have the idea and we have understood the intents, then we want to set up the environment and then do the coding. And of course, you can use GPT to help you with that. And of course, you want to use either data, proprietary data that you have in the form of a knowledge graph, or an API that you might have that can be helpful for a user. And then you can create your minimum viable product ready for testing, and then you can share it internally in the company, and send it on Slack to friends and try to see how they react, and then you can make it better. And then you go live, and then you start creating the schema markup that tells Google, hey, well, this is a web page, and maybe you start adding question and answers that are relevant for the search intent that you're looking at. And that's exactly how these applications have been built.
Andrea, can we answer one question before
Sure.
we move forward?
Of course.
So this question comes from Suban. Thank you very much for the question, Suban. So the question is, what would be the future of niche sites like Q&A websites? I guess apps that kind of like have this conversational way of interacting with them. Is that what we are talking about here?
I think that in general, we are going to get very accustomed with a conversational user interface. And we should not underestimate the power of great content, because whether it's true that I want to use natural language, in most cases, we always dreamed about speaking with the computer. I'm old enough, but I can tell you that as soon as I received my first Philips MSX, when I was maybe 8 years old, the dream was always there. It was to talk with the computer. And now finally we can talk with the computer. But reality is that it's not the same if you talk with, CNN.com, or if you talk with The Atlantic. It's a completely different conversation what you can have if we talk with, a large media sites of type A, or, a niche site of type B. So I think the interface is going to change, but the content is going to be, the same. And, so focusing on great content is always, a good answer here.
So essentially, as I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, we kind of like get in a situation where we use all these tools as a platform to build on top of, and kind of try to add value in different ways. And
Totally.
an example, for example, that I can think of a SaaS company. Let's say that you are a field service management software, okay, SaaS. What I can think of is a tool that could, in a conversational manner, let you know what features you may have to use, or what use cases are best, or what even what's the best pricing for you based on like the prompt that you give to this app that you've built. Yeah.
That's totally right. So let's review this workflow more in details, right? This is not a SaaS for field operations, but this is kind of an e-commerce. But you can see from the architecture that the principle is pretty much the same. So here I have a question, and what is the cheapest Ray-Ban, or what is the most expensive product? Either way. So the user has a question, and this question is parsed by this framework that I mentioned before. And there are going to be many of these frameworks. Even Google will become able to connect different apps. And we experimented with Google a couple of years ago on a project that was called mini apps. And mini apps were application inside search to provide specific functionality on a given query. Exactly what we're seeing here. So we have this kind of framework that sits in between that would create embeddings from the question, so transform the question into numbers so that it can be understood and translated into vectors. And then it would go back to the product knowledge graph in this case, to with that embeddings, with that question, convert it into whatever language you have in the product knowledge graph. It can be GraphQL in our case, it can be Sparkle, it can be SQL, whatever. And then this knowledge base will give you back the answer, and then this answer will go into the language model that it's at the bottom, that would get the response, which I don't know, maybe the most expensive product is Mew Mew, and then it would just get the response and write it back in natural language. So this is kind of the flow. So if you are a SaaS, you want to focus on building your data fabric. You want to have data accessible because you want to plug this data into the prompt. We'll get into that. So in order to understand how things works, then I'll kind of take you through some slides to understand a little bit of how language model works and how we can kind of personalize the response using our own APIs and data. So transformers are just a new architecture of a sequence-to-sequence neural network. And they are networks designed to transform a sequence of elements, whether it's a word or numbers, into another sequence. And they are just the evolution of a series of sequence-to-sequence networks, like recurrent neural network or long short-term memory neural networks. And I've been creating text using all of these three systems in the past. Now, the change with transformer is that they are faster to be trained, because we can finally parallelize training with a transformer, and they use something called attention that allows them to understand the relationship inside the input sequence and the relationship between the input and the output sequence. And this is extraordinary. This has changed totally the way in which this system works, even though they are statistical machines that are designed to predict the next word. So we get a sentence or a set of numbers in the input, and then this gets converted into numbers, embeddings, as we say before, and these embeddings get into a decoder that would get the numbers and transform them into an output sequence. So this means that if I have a sentence, for example, in Italian, it can get translated into another language, even if I'm using, something like pioggia a catinelle, which is, an idiomatic sentence. Now, transformers have been introduced in 2017 with a very famous paper, Attention is All You Need, co-authored by people working at the time in Google. And it was primarily focused on the translation task. But the reality is that we use transformer even when we want to now augment a video, like the one that I show you at the beginning of the presentation. And inside the encoder and inside the decoder, we have this multi-headed self-attention mechanism that allow the transformer to understand the contents of the input and the context of the output sequence. Now, to understand transformers, we have to understand embeddings, because embeddings are this latent feature space that condense, the meanings of a sentence. And so imagine that, this is a very simple and beautiful explanation of the embeddings. Imagine that we are in a 3D world, and the embedding space or the latent space, it's the shadow that is projected on a flat surface. So the embeddings are, a highly dense vector in a low dimensional space. So we are condensing a lot of meanings into a low dimensional space. Like in this case, the shadow is a two-dimensional space that projects a three-dimensional object. So it's simplifying, the complexity of the reality by projecting it on a plane. Imagine that embeddings can have, 256 planes. So it's not so simple, but it's way simpler than reality. By doing that, we can work directly with language. So AI embeddings are defined as a multi-tool, and this is Dale Markowitz from Google. She's a senior vice president at Google, and she's responsible for a lot of the innovation coming out of Google Labs. But I started to use embeddings in the last couple of years as a multi-tool for doing SEO. How? For example, if I look at the queries that the previously seen app, the structured data audit app, these are all the queries from the Search Console, and I'm using embeddings to cluster the intents and to understand, how I can connect that application with, let's say, relevant blog posts that the user might be interested in reading. Or, I can use embeddings to understand, what other question and answer pair I can use and add to that web page. So embeddings are, usable and help us understand how text work. So how do we, now that we briefly understood language models, how do we steer them? How do we make them do what we want them to do? So here comes in-context learning, which is it's usually defined as an emergent behavior in large language model that allows to us to condition a language model to perform a task in a certain way. So we can steer the model to provide a certain output by providing a specific prompt. So we can see these, of course, for example, in when we want to increase the factual accuracy of a language model. So yeah, I've done this experiment a while back with the U-chat. And so if I go on and I and ask who's Lily Ray, then since u.com doesn't have a knowledge graph, it would provide a piece of text that is kind of a combination of different pages and doesn't really make any sense. And then I have to increase the amount of information in the prompt, and I say, who is the Lily Ray, the SEO expert that lives in New York and is also a DJ? And then the language model is kind of, restricting its context, and it's providing an answer that is kind of better, but not yet the best. And then I go on and I start adding what in GPT-4 or GPT 3.5 is called system prompt, which is how the language model should behave. So I start adding a meta prompt, which is you are a truthful AI and you only provide factually correct information. So I kind of reduce the ability of the model to fantasize and create content. It's not working 100%, but it works better. And so I get something better. And then I go on and add more details in the prompt so that then the language model says what I want to say, but it uses natural language to do that. So that's in context learning. We can see that these can work also in a chain. So I can give you first a prompt, then I get an answer, and then I kind of augment the answer that I received with another prompt. And this is called chaining. Okay. So I get a prompt, I get a response, and then I chain the response with another prompt. And these allow me, for example, to fix something like this when I ask who is Andrea Volpini, and the model claimed that I had Instagram, but I don't use social networks since 2016. And so by making the model reason on the context and on the single statement that are included in the first response, I was able to make the model understand that yes, I don't use Instagram. That was false. Okay. Self-ask. This is yet another very interesting paper that explains how we can make a model more responsive to the context of the user. And so in this example, we tap into external data from a search engine, because since when using ChatGPT, I have a cutoff, and we have a female prime minister that have been elected after this cutoff. GPT wasn't aware of the fact that in Italy we do have a female prime minister. But if I then augment the answer with the response from a search engine, which is what I do in the code right below, then I can make the language model aware that we do have a female prime minister. Here is another example where we have, a series of questions that allow the model to disambiguate the first response and get better. And so if I ask, is WordLift a good option to automate SEO? The answer is yes, but there are a couple of intermediate answers and prompts. So in blue, you see the additional prompt that are created by the model to verify the question that is provided in the first sentence. You can play with the code here and try to understand how this works. And these are kind of examples on how we can tap into this emergent behavior.
Andre,
So, yep,
just a sec before we move forward, we have a couple of questions that I would like to go through
sure.
quickly. So the first one comes from Suban, and the question is, I want to understand source context according to Andrea. How to use source context for processing queries and planning content on the website? This is the first question.
So the source context, if I understand correctly, is the context that we pass in the prompt. If that is the right understanding, then of course that's exactly how you do in context learning. So you want to create these context for the model so that it doesn't derail, it doesn't hallucinate. So you want to create this source context from the content of your website. So you want to source from your website using traditional information extraction or search, if you want, the snippets that would create the best context for the language model.
Okay, I hope this answers Subban's question. And we have another one before we move forward.
Yep.
By Georgios. Can you share some examples, ideally with some values, of how you utilize the parameters such as temperature and top P you use in the prompts?
So temperature and top P are highly dependent on the model that you're using. So give you an example. If I use GPT 3.5, I'm going to possibly use a temperature 0, and I'm not going to set any top P. But if I use GPT-3, then, depending on the type of task, I might raise the temperature up to 0.6 or 0.7. So it's really dependent on the model that you're going to use. And also, we do a lot of fine-tuning of this model. So you typically can do transfer learning by doing in-context learning, which is what we're seeing here. So I get the relevant context, the source context, and I feed it into the prompt. This is called in-context learning. I do this at the prompt level, but I can do this also by fine-tuning the model, which means I provide thousands of samples of prompt and completion, and I help the model converge on this task so that I specialize it for this task. When I do this fine-tuning, then the temperature will be lower because uh, sorry, will be higher because I already kind of instruct the model to behave in a certain way. So I can go to up to 0. 0.8 in some cases. But I've done a lot of transfer learning. So I give a lot of samples of what I expect to see. So there are different strategies depending on the model that you're using. Not all models behave the same. You have to decide what models you need for that task. So
Okay, we can continue as the clock is ticking down for this webinar. We
yeah,
can
yeah, yeah.
continue, and if we have any other final questions at the end, we can cover those as well.
Yeah, so it's important that we familiarize with the idea of in-context learning and chain of thought. So the idea that I can kind of bring the model to with the elicitive prompting to reason around the data, because that would make it safer. And of course, these emergent ability that we have discussed are unique, and they're not present in smaller models. They're only present in the large models, and that allow us to explore a new area of science, because we do not know exactly what's going to happen as we increase the number of parameters. And of course, these changes arising as we are adding complexity to these models. Now, one thing that we do a lot in terms of, as you saw also from the Q&A free app, we generate a lot of question and answer, because this is also a great preparation for the conversational interface. Back to the question of what do we do with the niche site. So we start to translate them into Q&A so that we can then train a chatbot to answer to these to the user question with the right tone of voice. And so we have now a third iteration of our application for fact generation, and of course it sticks in terms of traffic. That's the important part. So it's not going up and then boom, and because the tone of voice is consistent with the brand, because the content is validated once it's generated. And so we can see here that when we started in 21, we started to see traffic coming in. We got excited, but then we thought maybe it's not going to last. And then you can see that, in the last 3 months of the last period, we have, almost 10x the traffic that we originally had on that website with this technique. So you can play with the question answering tool that I showed you before. But you have to keep in mind that you are an SEO first and foremost. So you have to understand the identity that you express when using AI, who you are, who you want to be, because AI is just a tool, just another tool. It's like Photoshop. It's just better. And of course, it's the biggest problem is over-reliance. So if we start, giving too much trust to these tools, then we start creating issues. We create problem in the quality of the content, but it can be also extremely dangerous. So as we are SEOs, we want to focus on different techniques for testing the impacts. And every time that we do something, whether it's writing a product description, like in this case, or writing an FAQ or creating an application, we want to test carefully that it's actually creating value. So we have control and variant group, and we don't do it just for one single batch of pages. We do it for maybe 5 or maybe 10 batch of pages. So what I want you to understand is that when you do use AI, and you have to use AI, you have to be extremely careful in reporting the impact, because we want to measure how things are progressing. We want to measure the quality of the content that gets generated, and you want to see that you are actually creating an uplift. This is another technique that we use for creating prompts. We use synthetic images in order to increase the quality of our prompts. So we generate a piece of text that describes a product, and then we generate an image from this generated piece of text. And then from this image, we try to compare it with the actual product. And then I'm pretty much done with the time. There is a lot more that we could look at, such as content validation, but and what to do with videos. But yeah, it's a lot of stuff.
I guess we can go through some of this stuff. I mean, it's okay if we go a bit over time,
Okay.
and whoever wants to stay with us, like they can stay. It's okay if we go a bit like over the time we set for this webinar, and
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, we have some more time.
Okay.
That's totally fine.
So quickly, to wrap it up, I mean, content validation, it's a crucial step. If you are doing something with AI, or someone is proposing you to do something with AI, you always have to ask, how is the content validation pipeline looking like? Is it safe? Because nowadays we see, of course, a lot of tools that are using AI because it's so simple, as we saw. But what are we doing to validate the content that we're generating? For example, as I show you in the structured data audit, I'm providing the data from the API to the user because I want the user to be able to check if there is a correspondence with what we're saying and what the data is coming. Very simple technique. In some cases, if we are generating a product description, we want to check if the information is available in the text, if the information available is correct, factually correct, and if it fits with the SEO and content guidelines. And that means that every time that I produce a content, I have to go through these steps and I have to check if it works or not. Now, how do we validate open-ended answers or FAQ content? Well, guess what? There is also here an emergent behavior that we can use, and we can use GPT itself to validate statements. So let's say that we have a question like, is ChatGPT going to kill Google? And then we get a first answer from the AI, which is no, ChatGPT will not kill Google. ChatGPT is a language model, blah, blah, blah. Then we have another prompt that say, here is a statement, which is the first generated answer, and then translate these in a bullet point of assertion. So the model will then create, all the bullet point for the statement provided above. So ChatGPT, natural language processing tool, Google, online search engine, and so on and so forth. And then we go in with another prompt and we say, okay, now here is a bullet point list of assertion, and then you use the generated output from the previous step in the chain. And then for each assertion, determine whether it is true or false. And if it is false, explain why. And then you see that, the last one is false because the model realized that ChatGPT and Google are indeed two different services. So maybe the question is not correct in the beginning because they are separate services. So we are reasoning with the model by chaining, one answer with another, and by making the model understand more about the first output. Now, this is only providing us with an indication. It might be a red flag for a content team to say, well, here there's something that doesn't sound correct. Okay. So these are ways in which we can flag issues that come out of these generated content. So here we have another pipeline for making sure that the tone of voice is right, that the grammar is right. And this is, again, another language model that we can use on top of the generated content to validate if the grammar is correct, if we're using, for example, the vocabulary that brand is used on the website, and other aspects that we might want to check. This is another workflow that it's valuable for anyone that is providing video content on their website, because we do have a lot of videos out there, but it's not always accessible. And so here I have created this workflow that extracts the text from the video using Whisper by OpenAI, that is open source. And then with these transcripts, first create a small summary, and then create question and answers with the links back to the point of the video where the answer is provided, so that the users can see, that answer. And so this is a keynote interview of Bill Gates, and this is the short summary that I generated. At this time, this is GPT-3, not 4. And then these are the segments in terms of question and answer with the link that points back to the segment. If you bring all this data into a web page, guess what? You're going to get a lot more SEO traffic, and you're just creating a better user experience from your video content. So final learnings: language models are unsafe, biased, and racist. And you have to keep this in mind. Even if GPT-4 is better than GPT-3 and 40% better in providing factually correct information according to OpenAI's evaluation, it's still not good enough, especially if you're interacting with your client, which is the most precious asset. So you need to create a feedback loop, whether it's a feedback loop with a knowledge graph, a feedback loop with your content creators team, a feedback loop with your APIs. You have to have that in place. And you have to create a data fabric. You have to have, your metadata all in one place, because you're going to feed it into the prompt and make your conversational sound more realistic and concrete. And you want to keep on analyzing these emerging behaviors of the language models, because that's where, we're steering the results and the completion. And of course, we want to play safe and invest always on a validation pipeline, invest always on some level of process where the user will be able to understand if what you're providing is true or not. And that's all.
Whoa, that was mind-blowing. A lot of information, but I think eye-opening. So as I understand it, and like you will allow me to kind of draw an analogy here, essentially what we are talking about, what we talked about in this webinar, is building a chat GPT for kind of
Everyone.
for every website, right?
Yes.
And an app that has this conversational way of like letting people to interact with it in the context of great content on the website, structured data with schema markup and so on and so forth, and with the ultimate goal of adding value to your users, your customers, and so on and so forth.
Great summary. GPT-4 would have done, just the same. It wouldn't be good enough. So yeah.
We have one last question from Suban once again. How monetizing will work with chatbots? Currently, we have ads as our monetization part. I guess that the question, as I see it, and of course you're welcome to share your thoughts, Andrea. The answer is that, as I see it, monetization will come by the fact that this will feed your main business, right? It adds value to your audience, to your like potential customers, and so on and so forth. And this is how you will monetize it, right? This is what we are talking about. But
I think
I would like to hear your thoughts.
I think we talk about building application on the website of a SaaS company, and of course, a SaaS company monetized by selling its service to the user. And so, of course, the monetization path in the case of a SaaS, it's really enticing users and providing value during the customer journey. But the issue of monetization is, of course, very broad, because we are starting to see already that Bing is providing advertisement inside the Bing chat responses. And therefore, we see that by providing sources behind each answer, they can also provide, promoted content. So this response might be sourced from site A, but look, I also have site B that just bought advertising to be promoted inside this answer. So we expect monetization to happen, as this model try to source the web, providing feedback to the users. That could be a way.
That's a different path for sure. And I mean, as you correctly put it, like for SaaS, it's pretty straightforward how you can monetize that, right? We have one very last question by Georgios once again. Which model is better to use for Greek language apps? And I guess for other languages as well, but
So once again, we have to look at the use case, because if I have to build the apps that does the structured data audit, The response is very limited and not too complex, and therefore I could look at language models that are available in the Hugging Face app. Okay, open source, directly accessible from Hugging Safe itself. Now, if I need to do something more conversational and complex, I realize that GPT-4 it's a fantastic solution, because you can actually work all your pipelines and prompting in English, and then just say, okay, write these in Greek, and that will work, because I've tested it with Arabic, I tested it with Italian, and I tested it with German, and it just worked perfectly. So, of course, GPT-4 has its own cost at the moment, but that would be my preferred option for working multilingual.
That's great. That's a great way to wrap things up. Andrea, I want to thank you and the team at WordLift very much for doing this and for preparing this amazing presentation for us today. And I would like to thank all the people who joined us. Make sure to, I guess there will be a follow-up email with the
Yep.
recording and the slides, because many people ask
Yep.
for the slides. And also, since we are here, we have another webinar coming up on April 20th with the amazing Mark Hillens from Airmeet, and we are going to discuss maximizing content through event-led growth. You don't want to miss that. So make sure to go to our website, minutia.com/T, and register for free. And we will see you there. Andrea, thank you very much.
Bye bye. Bye bye. Ciao, everyone. Thanks to you. Ciao,
Have a great
ciao.
weekend, everyone. Thank you.
Bye bye.